am Sandra Murphy and will serve as the worship associate for today's service. During my early childhood, school years, and into my 20s, I was a member of a very traditional Protestant denomination. I used to believe what the ministers and Sunday school teachers told me. There's one true God and only one true path to salvation. In my 30s, I discovered Unitarian Universalism, and now I believe in a living tradition that draws from many sources because there is wisdom in the world's religions. Unitarian Universalism encourages my individual spiritual growth. To learn more about what it means to be a UU, you can visit our website, uuflint.org, or I invite you to contact our ministers, the Reverends Lynn and Jerry Kerr. And now a few announcements. Trunk or Treat is this Friday, October 23rd at 6 p.m. We need a head count of children by today, Sunday the 18th. You can call, text, or email Aaron Rockefeller to RSVP. Each family that has RSVP'd will receive a pumpkin to take home. We can't wait to see you there in costume, and if you would like to bring your car and pass out candy, please let Aaron know today. Consider sharing today's service with someone you know. The share button is easy to find near the screen where you watch the service on our YouTube channel. If you watch us on Facebook, remember to click like, as it makes it easier for people to join in. Please note that our Saturday outdoor gatherings are canceled until warmer weather. Thanks for your participation in these lunchtime get-togethers, and a special thanks to Deb Simmons and the membership committee for taking the lead in making these happen. Which gives me a perfect segue to talk to you about the third T in this trifecta of time, talent, and treasure. All three are necessary to sustain this beloved community. Your offering cannot be dropped into our collection basket this morning, but it can be made online at uuflint.org, or you can mail it to the church. Consider what you are receiving this morning with our service, and then consider what you can generously give back. All offerings, no matter what size, are deeply appreciated. And one last announcement. Our congregation supports a local nonprofit each month by taking a special collection. This month, we are taking this collection for Motherly Intercession. Motherly Intercession is committed to providing a solid support system for children of incarcerated parents. Motherly Intercession strives to break the cycle of intergenerational incarceration. If you're interested in learning more about their work and perhaps making a donation, you can go to unlockthefuture.org, or you can go to uuflint.org and through our donate button, make a gift to this very unique and vital organization. Please be sure to note in your gift that it is for Motherly Intercession. And now we will begin our service with a prelude from Jennifer Howard, who gives generously of her time and abundant talent to UUCF. our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, and a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us. And now I invite you to join me with gusto, because you are at your homes, in reading our covenant, recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. Our opening words are from Cynthia Landrum. Spirit of life and love, we gather together in different ways this morning. From computer screens, from telephones, from car radios. We gather reaching out across the wires and the wireless, waving from a safe distance, to come together in religious community. From living room to front porch to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other, to the world, ready to build a community of hope and love as we face this bright morning. We are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hopes and our prayers in service to one another and this world. It is a new way, but an old way that we come together in worship today.
Good morning. Our meditation is from the words of Jesus of Nazareth. They are the Beatitudes and are translated not from Greek texts, but from the language of Jesus actually spoke, Aramaic. Please join me in the spirit of meditation and contemplation. Blessed are those who are refined in breath. They shall find their ruling principles and ideals guided by God's light. Healed are those who weep for their frustrated desire. They shall see the face of fulfillment in a new form. Healthy are those who have softened what is rigid within. They shall receive physical vigor and strength from the universe. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for physical justice, righteousness. They shall be surrounded by what is needed to sustain their bodies. Blessed are those who, from their inner wounds, birth mercy. They shall feel its warm arms embrace them. Aligned with the One are those whose lives radiate from a core of love. They shall see God everywhere. Healed are those who bear the fruit of sympathy and safety for all. They shall hasten the coming of God's new creation. Tuned to the source are those persecuted for trying to
when you are conspired against and accused falsely of corruption for my sake. Do everything extreme, including letting your ego disappear. For this is the secret of claiming your expanding home in the universe. And remember, it is the sign of the prophets and prophetesses to feel the disunity around them intensely. Amen, and blessed be.
Our reading today is from the words of Carl Gustav Jung and of a distinguished modern-day Jungian analyst, Dr. Susan Mertens. In 1917, Carl Gustav Jung wrote that, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. Where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking. The one is but the shadow of the other." Over 100 years later, Dr. Mertens elaborates, "The person who manifests aggressive protest, who has to dominate to feel secure, is unable to love. Love and the will to power are antithetical to each other. Think of moguls, captains of industries, CEOs who are full of themselves and take delight in declaring to their underlings, 'You are fired.' Such persons manifest power, the power to control lives and fate of others. As Jung says, love here is lacking." A journalist writes about the President of the United States. "Never before did there appear in the first office so poor an object of human ambition as when our President made it an eminence on which to exhibit his inability to behave and his incapacity to reason. His low cunning conspired with his devouring egoism to make him throw off the restraints of official decorum in the expectation that he would find duplicates of himself in the crowds he addressed. Never has a blustering demagogue been led by such a distempering self of self-importance." Those words appeared in the Atlantic Monthly in 1868 and described then-President Andrew Johnson shortly before he was impeached, but not convicted or removed from office. The well-known Unitarian abolitionist Lydia Maria Child wrote of Andrew Johnson, "Every true lover of the country must want to crawl into a knothole and hide himself whenever the name of our president is mentioned." This happened in America, of course. Andrew Johnson, an anti-abolitionist who was afraid of the Africanization of America, who worked to keep African Americans in slavery before the Civil War and in near slavery after the war. He was elected the governor of Tennessee, then vice president of the United States, and then became president when Lincoln was assassinated. Johnson openly called critics disloyal and even treasonous. He called people's names, talked seriously about hanging people who opposed him, and he said lynched black men were to blame for their own deaths. He threw insults like candy during his speeches, and according to the prevailing standards of the day, Johnson held the functional equivalent of Make America Great Again rallies. Isn't that interesting? That this supposedly tough, bully guy had an intense need for the affirmation of people he didn't know, people who didn't really know him. And yes, all this happened in America. Andrew Johnson was finally impeached in part for his violent rhetoric. He lost his bid to be reelected president, but then he got elected as Senator of Tennessee in 1874. A lot of people obviously liked him and voted for him, even though he was an arrogant racist, an authoritarian demagogue, pretending to be a tough guy. I think all of this somehow presents a solution to the present presidential situation in America that troubles so many of us. Many of us ask, how can such a bad person get elected to high public office? How can that happen in America, where we are supposed to be above kings, despots, and dictators? Our country was founded on the idea that we need to get rid of authoritarian rulers. After wrestling with this question for some time, I've come to a sobering and perhaps helpful conclusion that it is amazing this doesn't happen more often. In today's reading, we heard the thoughts of Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss explorer of the inner space between our ears. He said, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. And where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking. The one is but the shadow of the other." According to Carl Gustav, the human mind is full of everything, filled with the very good, such as those who are, as Jesus said, aligned with the one whose lives radiate from a core of love. And Jung thought we also have the very opposite of love in us, the lust for power that drives out all of love, to the extent that the very mention of such a person's names wants to make you creep into a knothole and hide yourself. Just as the world is made of the opposites of up and down, light and dark, hot and cold, so too is our mind built of inherited ways of being that are very good or their opposite, just plain evil. To Jung and his modern-day advocates, this is not just a religious idea or a philosophical proposition. Just as there are positive and negative poles in the physical world, the mind, the mental world of every person has its own opposites, with the shadow side filled with energies and impulses that must be recognized but not acted out. And for those of us who are amazed when our neighbors elect another Andrew Johnson, another loveless person, here's the important part that I'd like to explore with you today. It seems clear that people who are unconscious of the evil shadow side of the human mind don't even realize they are voting for a person incapable of love. They just think they're voting for a fun-loving, tough guy who is fighting for them. It is said that self-knowledge is a rare thing. And I believe that is never more true than with people who have no understanding that they are voting for the hatred and chaos candidate. Perhaps you've seen those posters of Rambo Trump. He is depicted as a soldier in his war-torn uniform with bulging muscles, and he's carrying an automatic rifle that is blazing away. That is simply a symbol of toughness in battle. And the creators and the people who display such posters see only a tough guy doing battle against what they think is evil. They see a bold guy who can never be afraid of something like a little virus. At the bottom of the poster, it says, "God, guns, and guts made America. Let's make it great again." That slogan is surely lacking in love. The classic symbolic character for such aggressive, loveless people is the evil joker, also known as the jester or the trickster. And of course, I'm not talking about the good joker, who is at the opposite positive end of the joker continuum. The good joker is a comedian who knows how to poke fun at things and people to make them aware of some important truth. But the evil jester loves chaos, lusts for power, and is a liar who isn't even worried about that thing called the truth. According to many psychoanalysts, and as hard as it may be for many of us to believe, people can be blind to the dark side of their candidate. Some people are just less conscious of the evil within the human mind, and so they can't see it in others or themselves. It's not that they are willfully evil. They just see a powerful person, a Rambo businessman who loves firing people, and they want that simplistic boldness in their leader. In other words, they don't see the opposite evil side of their Rambo hero. There is no consciousness, said Carl Gustav Jung, without discrimination of the opposites. And yes, this also applies to those of us who ask the question, how did it happen in America? In 2016, I spent a lot of time reassuring my coworkers that there was no way Donald Trump could ever be elected president. I read the polls that showed it was too close to call, but nevertheless, I could not conceive that in America there were enough people who could vote for such a person. I watched the election polls daily, hourly, half-hourly. I was checking the polls every half hour, and I saw it was close. But I could not believe that it could happen. I would visit the offices of my two close friends and staff members and soothe their worries with stories of how Nate Silver, the guru of accurate election predicting, was saying it would not happen. I must have been very convincing because my good friends went home on election eve convinced that when they woke up the next morning, we would have our first woman president, and they were very happy about that. As you might guess, in the coming weeks, I apologized profusely to them. And of course, I defended myself by noting that lots of people thought it could never happen. And in fact, global markets markets plunged as the world gasped in collective disbelief. One might naturally ask, how could there be such a lack of consciousness on both sides? Some people could not see the evil in the joker that they voted for. And the others could not see how such a thing was even possible. Both were not fully awake. I certainly wasn't fully awake. So I have to ask, how can I, how can we ever hope to stop such a thing if we can't even believe it can happen? A lot of fearful people voted for Andrew Johnson because they were foolishly afraid that African Americans were going to take over America. In the 1950s, a lot of people were foolishly afraid that the communists were going to take over America, so they voted for another loveless joker and supposed strongman, Joseph McCarthy. In 1944, he ran for the U.S. Senate and billed himself as Tail Gunner Joe, and he exploited and exaggerated his military record. Then in 1950, he gave a Lincoln Day speech at the Women's Republican Club of Wheeling, West Virginia. During the talk, he held up a piece of paper claiming that it held the names of 205 people who were known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party, but who were still, nevertheless, working and shaping policy in the U.S. State Department. In fact, according to McCarthy's own personal secretary, the list contained only a few scribbled notes on another topic, housing for veterans. McCarthy later admitted that himself. His career of gaining power through spreading hatred and lies was off to a good start. He called Jews sheenies and heaves, and called one of his staffers useless, no good, just a miserable little Jew. He used his power and fear of Russia's nuclear abilities to start investigations and hearings. This was his way of supposedly finding the communists he said were in the U.S. government. He was supported by countless Americans who loved this tough guy, who said he was protecting them. The McCarthy hearings were 36 days of televised hearings, and in his 4 years witch hunt for communists, he ruined many careers and lives. McCarthy also painted liberals as soft on communism. And this knock against President Truman and the Democrats, it drove him out of the White House and Congress, ending the era of the New Deal that had improved the lives of countless Americans. He was a powerful trickster indeed. People named his destructive, tricky ways McCarthyism, but Joe himself said, McCarthyism is just Americanism with its sleeves rolled up. An idea lacking in love, if there ever was one. And McCarthy didn't exclusively pick on suspected communist sympathizers. He was equally involved in what became known as the Lavender Scare, a witch hunt that got scores of gay men fired from their government jobs. People committed suicide rather than face the vicious accusations at his hearing. In late 1954, McCarthy was finally dethroned by Republicans and Democrats alike when they found the nerve to say to him, "Have you no decency?" Evil tricksters very often have an unhappy ending to their life. Can you imagine what living with all that rage must do to the human body and soul? At some point during his time as a senator, McCarthy began drinking heavily. Soon he was drinking a bottle of vodka a day, and he would even put the vodka into his milk to hide the depths of his head from his friends. In April of 1957, his liver was no longer functioning, and he soon died of complications from alcohol withdrawal. He was just 48 years old. Obviously, our country has periodically chosen hatred at the ballot box instead of love, justice, and reason. Today, it seems we are in the midst of two global pandemics. One is physical, caused by a novel coronavirus. The other is a psychic pandemic, affecting hundreds of millions of people, making them unable to see the evil in the very people they think will save them. Measuring the effects of both pandemics is difficult, and stopping them is even harder. Jung often spoke of these psychic epidemics, such as the one that led to the rise of Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito. He said, "We are better at protecting against failing crops, inundations, epidemics, and invasions from the Turk than we are against our own deplorable spiritual inferiority, which seems to have little resistance to psychic epidemics." End quote. Spiritual inferiority. That would be a good name for a disease affecting otherwise good people that makes them irrational enough to support people like Andrew Johnson, Joseph McCarthy, and other more recent malevolent jokers. And the current worldwide prevalence of duly elected authoritarian jokers is proof of this pandemic. Professor Johan Groff is a retired sociologist from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, a country that knows a lot about power-hungry leaders. Professor Groff is now interested in the crossover between Jungian psychology and sociology, and he writes, "There has been a dramatic increase in the number of authoritarian governments in the last 10 years. Russia, China, India, Turkey, Hungary, and the Philippines, to name the most prominent. The Arab Spring of 2010 has become the Arab Winter of 2014. Donald Trump has all the attributes of an authoritarian, but is at least somewhat limited in his actions by the American constitutional framework. More distressing has been the degree to which these leaders have been supported by voters." While writing this sermon, it became obvious to me that some will experience it in very technical terms as a downer. But that doesn't have to be the case, because we are far from powerless, and people who elect tricksters to the Oval Office, they aren't evil, but they do have a very bad case of the inability to see the dark side of their favorite candidate. And those of us who could not believe it could happen, well, we aren't entirely free from this psychic infection either. We all have our moments of being an uncaring person, out to be powerful for the sake of having power, or to bolster an anemic self-image. Anyone who thinks progressive thinkers are immune to the power of the joker side haven't lived in a campus dormitory with a bunch of would-be UU ministers. And those of us who proclaim that our doctrine is love, we don't live with the trickster. but we sometimes get a bit too close to his campsite. So what do we do? Jung believed that anyone who attempts to deal with the problem of their inner opposites is making a significant contribution towards world peace. We, of course, will still try to reason with people who think jokers are their friend, but we also need to fully recognize the bully joker who is in us too, and who gets out now and then. This may, in fact, be the most powerful thing we can do to inoculate our world against the danger of electing tricksters, jesters, and jokers to positions of power. Now I know this may sound like some old Star Trek episode. Alien beings who can heal the minds of others when they heal their own imperfections. Well, actually this is no different from being the change you want to see. And we speak of that often. And it's no different than our belief in the interdependent web of all of life. The world is a sometimes frightening, often frustrating, but always beautiful place to be, and we have work to do to keep it safe. Thank you for watching today. And now, if you will excuse me, I need to go check the polls.
Closing words are from Barrow Dunn. And now, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides, and good does not yet prosper, let us gather what strength and confidence and valor we have, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world awaited be a world attained. And if you'll please join me at home in reciting our words for Extinguishing the Chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts